Hello, my name is Casa, and this is my family interview for communications. Please state your name, relation to me, and who you live with.
Hi, my name is Haile, Eyob Nessibu, and in relation to you, I am your uncle, the youngest brother of your mother, and I live in Woodbridge, Virginia with my lovely wife and 3 beautiful kids, 5 and under.
What do you know about your family name and what does it mean?
So my family name, so, you know, in Ethiopia, I'm from Ethiopia, in East Africa. At the time, I think that there are limited resources back in the days. So what's looked upon as something positive is abundance, relative degree of plentifulness, ample quantity. And so that's what Nessibu that's what it means, is what I've been told.
Are there any family traditions that have been passed on through the generations?
Our family is pretty big, particularly on my father's side. And they have what they call Gilawuha. They use the first initials of different members of the family and made the name Gilawuha. It's just an abbreviation. So they have these family gatherings in Ethiopia with all that family member, and they also have them here in America. And so we meet once a month here in the Washington, D.C. area. I mean, it could be a meeting of anywhere between 40-50 people to more. And sometimes we also get together with everybody from the different states here in America. So that's a traditional gathering that we do here.
Are there any notorious or infamous characters in the family?
Yes, one that I like to particularly talk about is my great-grandfather. His name is Walde Gabriel, and which is my great-grandfather, which is your great-great-grandfather. He was very notorious in winning over lands. I don't know if they call them attorneys or land attorneys, or but somehow they bid for lands and they win, and this is during the monarchy time. And this is during Menelik II's reign as Emperor Menelik II, the king. And so a lot of the people in the neighborhood started thinking, you know what, this guy keeps winning all these lands, so we got to find a way to frame him and get him out the way because he keeps winning all the lands. So what they did was they plotted against him and framed him, and they took a dead body and put it on his property and framed him. And so because of that, he was charged with murder, and he was in His Majesty King Menelik's custody, and he was put in jail. So they kind of framed him, and so he was in jail. So the way the story goes is a fellow inmate had received a letter from the king, King Menelik II. It's a piece of paper with the king's seal on it, and it has a birch bark. So back in the days, they cut pieces from the tree and they used ink, and that's how the kings wrote letters, and has a king's seal on it. And so, and literacy was not very, you know, it was a big problem and issue at the time. So, you know, he asked, does anybody know how to read? And, you know, my great-grandfather was educated, so he knew how to read, which is your great-great-grandfather. He read it, and he realized it was a pardon from the king himself. And so he reads it to this guy and said he was set free. So he gets set free and he leaves. But my great-grandfather was a very clever man. So what he did was he asked him, hey, listen, do you mind if I can keep that, you know, that birch bark, so that I can write letters to my family or what have you, because, you know, it's far few between. You don't have papers everywhere like that, you know. So he takes that paper and he erases the guy's name somehow, and he uses the ink and writes on that birch bark his name, and then he uses that same letter to pardon himself. So he swindled them and got out of jail. And so he was free, but what makes it interesting is he goes back to the town where he was, you know, winning all those lands, and he goes into in the middle of, like, I don't know, it's called Times Square or whatever, in the middle of, you know, the town square, announces it and showing it and bragging about it. Look, the king has forgiven me. I am free at last. Thank God Almighty, I'm free at last. And from that time on, everybody knows that he was free. They couldn't do nothing about it. And that's the tale that I've been told, and it's been passed down to generations.
Are there any special stories that have been passed down from one generation to the next?
That was sort of, the previous one was sort of one, but another one is my mom's arranged marriage. So ever since she was 5 years old, you know, at the time. So my mom's side of the family was also kind of very wealthy. Her father fought in the wars against Italy, and he died in a war early. So her mom was very young, and she kind of got remarried. And so though my mom was with stepsisters and all that, and at the age of 5, men have been trying to marry my mom. She was considered very beautiful, and at the age of 5, they'll say, hey, when your daughter becomes of age, which is usually probably 11 or 12, you know, to get married. And so, you know, my stepfather, her stepfather promises her to another prominent man in the town or whatever, you know, somebody very prominent that owns lots of lands. And he takes her in to get married to his house until she becomes of age. And she goes there, and she hated it there. She doesn't know anybody there. So she escapes, runs away, and comes back home. And she never marries that man. So that's one story that we were told.
So how did your parents come to meet and marry?
Interesting. So my dad also happens to be one of those very prominent men, and also through his father, he's also stayed in that kind of line of work. He was an attorney for land, and also you know, a judge. And he had seen her, and the story is that somebody told him that if he marries that woman, that he'll be as like a priest or something. I can't remember the details, but he was promised that if he marries that lady, that he will have lots of fruits and will have lots of babies, and none of them won't die, because at the time people would have babies, and you know, if you have 4 babies, like 2 or 3 of them would die. You know, it's just the infancy death rate was very high. So, but they're telling him she was very fertile, and you know, so he went above and backwards to marry her, and I think she was supposed to marry. So her stepfather wanted his oldest daughter to marry my dad, because my dad was a prominent man, but my dad didn't want that. He wanted the younger one. He said no to him, and that he was going to let her marry somebody else. And so my dad kind of was swindled him into, you know, some politics. He went into politics with him, and he's saying, hey, listen, you know, if you want to do this business with me and that business to do with me in terms of land and, you know, farming and all that, then you kind of have to make a long story short, you kind of had to forces his hand, like, so, you know, the stepdad kind of had to arrange my mom to marry my dad.
I am going to now ask you 2 questions in full. Have any great historical events significantly affected the family? And are there any stories in your family about how a great fortune was lost or made?
Okay, so for the first part of the historical event, so after Menelik's reign, it was King Haile Selassie I. He reigned for about 40 years. So at the beginning of his reign, towards the end of his reign in the 70s, I believe, or something, Mengistu Haile Mariam, what they call as a Red Terror, the military junta, they had a revolutionary war there, and they kind of had a revolutionary war and overthrown the king and deposed the king, and became this communist party supported by Russia and the communists, Lenin and all that. So at that time, during that war, a lot of my family members during the Revolutionary War died. I know that they were fighting against, because they were supporting the king. They worked for the king. They owned lots of land with the king. So they were supporting the king. My grandmother's house was burnt onto the ground. So a lot of atrocities did happen during that time, and it was considered the Red Terror. And they were using force and military power to terrorize people to submit. So that was one of them. So the lost fortune part, interesting, kind of plays along with that. So not to mention all the stuff that my grandmother lost. So on my dad was a prominent land keeper. He had about 17 different farmlands, and I'm sure there's properties on them to take care of the land. I'm sure he had, you know, employees of that land that worked the land. And on top of that, he also had other properties that he owned that he rented out. So different rental properties. So when the military came in and the Communist Party came in, so they nationalized all the lands, took every land from everybody and say, hey, you know what, you get 1 land per person. So my dad kind of lost all of that he had, all the farmland that he had, all the weapons, you know, and then not to mention all that, the laws changed, so they removed him from the bench as a judge and forced him into retirement. You know, so he lost cattle, homes, lands, and so he was kind of left with no employment, no income, and so those were some of the fortunes that we lost.
What is the geography of your family? Why did they move?
So, you know, at the time during King Haile Selassie's reign, and when my dad was there, you know, only a few of my older siblings were born at the time, and they were in the countryside where they had lots of farms, but they moved around a lot. So my dad kind of moved from the farmland to a nearby city, which is called Nessibu. And there, because you know, you can only have one land for one person or one house, he used my mom's name and he used it as her name is Buzurk, so he called it Buzurk Coffee Shop, basically Buzurk Bunagit, and he had a coffee shop built there. So we moved to Desi in the city so he can have that business. Well, I wasn't born, but he also had an inn there along with it. And then in Addis Ababa, in the capital city of Ethiopia, he had purchased a home there, and he put that home under one of my oldest brother's names. So that way, you know, the government won't take it, and he could still have property and all of that. And then, so in terms of moving, so and then my mother during King Haile Selassie's reign, my mom's brother, his name is Burhanu Yima, he was also King Haile Selassie's diplomat, and he was already in the United States of America. So that's our connection, our tie to America. So he had brought my older sister for education here in America. And that's how the transition from moving from Ethiopia to America kind of started. Was he, you know, during military, Jonta came in and it was all this chaos. So my uncle kind of brought my sister for education and away from all that violence at the same time.
What are some common expressions that people in your family use?
Oh man, this is going to be very hard to say. You know, a lot of times when you're speaking different languages, there's a lot of lost. You know, there's a lot lost in translation. So to give you an example, it's like, you know, first let me say it in English. You know, whenever we bring people into the house to eat our food, you know, like, you know, and to sleep in our beds and all that, and my mom would always say, "Why are you bringing all these people? Or why are you bringing all these people to eat the food that doesn't belong to you? It's not even yours. You don't even have food to eat. It's not yours. You know, and this bed, you don't have room for your head. Why are you bringing in all these people?" So for that, there's a saying that says, "Abai malaria ilelo gundizo izoran." So Abai is the Blue Nile, and it flows north towards the Mediterranean Sea. And along with it, and it's continuously moving, and along with it, you know, brings in the whole neighborhood, meaning like the wood and the trees and the branches and all the fertile soil and all of that, and it just washes it up and all the way takes it up to Sudan and through Egypt. And so it's basically saying, listen, Abai, you don't even rest your head anywhere. You don't take a nap. You don't sleep. You're always on the run. You don't even have a place to rest your head, but you're taking all of this natural resource along with you. So that's kind of the saying, basically. But that's the saying that my mom says all the time. Anytime somebody does more than they can afford, that's what she says.
How are holidays celebrated in your family? What are the special traditions?
Oh man, there's lots of holidays that we really enjoy celebrating, particularly Christmas and Thanksgiving. But I would think that, and I think you would agree with me, the biggest one would be Thanksgiving. It's an American tradition. I mean, to continue from where I left off from earlier, my older sister came, and then there one by one, because of the war, we kind of all came. So we're all here in the Washington, D.C., Maryland, Virginia area. And during Thanksgiving, my dad's side of the family, which is pretty big, we stay connected through Gilauha, which is like a group of us family members. We created this little organization. We just stay together, meet monthly, and pay dues, and we use that money for traveling and all that. And so one of the things we do with it is like to throw a big Thanksgiving party. And it's usually particularly held at my older sister's house. And we're all gathered there. People bring different foods. I mean, we talk about the pies and the ice cream and the turkey. I'm getting hungry just talking about it, but that is like one tradition, you know, that we have. And I tell people at work, oh man, how many people come over to your house? Probably 100, like 100. Like, yeah, well, it's just a big family get together. It's a big Thanksgiving celebration, and we really love it. And that's one thing that I'm grateful for here in America.
Does your family hold a reunion? How important is it, and how is it organized?
Okay, so yes, to answer your question, yes, we do have reunions, and I think it's very important. We talk about it in those meetings every month, and how important it is to keep the family together. So what we do is let me give you two examples. One example that we did was we rented out a big coach bus, you know, that seats like 100 people or whatever, and we packed everybody in there, and we took a trip to Ocean City, and we split up the kids based on age, so they can meet with each other and get to know each other as they grow up and they bond, as you know, not only just as family, but you know, just as so they can grow up as friends and be guidance to one another, and you know, you grow up like that and you become very close. And then the older ones continue to bond and build each other and help each other on each other's relationships, give advices or life lessons or what have you. So that was kind of like a trip that we took to Ocean City. And then, you know, we switch it up into something different. We did a trip to a camping trip in upper northern Maryland, about the Potomac River. I can't remember the name of the place off the top of my head, but it had cabins. We did bonfires. We played volleyball outside. We went hiking, played in the bushes, and, you know, I don't know, captured the flag at nighttime and did marshmallows, and I mean, you name it. I mean, we were just staying up all night and just talking and just having fun. So those are one of the things that we do for reunions.
What is one thing that differentiates your family from most others?
It's a great question. You know, I think at this point of the interview, people can hear from previous questions that I answered that it's the large size of it, but yet it's also the closeness of it, just because of how I answered the previous two questions about how tight-knit we are. We take these vacations, we get to see each other at least monthly, every month, and yeah, so a wedding of our family. My niece just got married in 2018, and it was 1,000 people. It was Manassas, Virginia. It was a huge place, and it was 1,000 people. We had about 20 different computers checking people in, you know, that were coming in. It was just a big organization, and we worked together as a unit, like a military army. Like, I'm talking about, we have instructions being emailed to everybody, text chains, meetings. I mean, it's like a little mini military family here. And a graduation party, a typical American graduation party probably have 20, 30 people in it, maybe 40. I'm talking hundreds here. They have DJs, and some of my other extended family, I'm talking about, they're inviting singers, like it's a wedding singers, you know, like it becomes, you know, ballrooms, photo shoots and all that. So speeches, I mean, it becomes humongous. So I think what makes our family unique is that. And sometimes when I take some of my other friends that are not part of my family, and they go there and they see this, I'm like, oh, you guys are always throwing these ridiculous parties. What is with all this? Why do you got to feed the 10,000 just for graduation? But it's I think what makes our family unique. They just love that.
Does the family have foods, recipes, or any special meals?
You know, I'm gonna answer your question because I have to answer it, but I'm gonna take a fifth on that one. But to answer your question, I'm sure my sisters can probably give you specific recipes that have been passed down from generation to generation. One thing I do have, my dad just recently passed away in September of 2018. There was this thing, I don't know what it's called. It's a big container thing that it's made out of clay. You've probably seen it in Bible stories. And it has like 2 strings where you can carry with it, and I wish I had a picture of it. I have it upstairs. And they would bring water from the river or from the stream. That was used to bring water back in the days, and my father preserved it, my mother preserved it, and then when my dad passed away, my mom gave it to me, and I have it. That's one thing that kind of brings tears to my eyes, that I knew my dad used, and, you know, generation to generation used. But it's not a recipe, but that's something that's been used, that's been passed down to me, that reminds me of my dad and my mom using it. But I think for the most part, and I'm choking up here, excuse me. For the most part, I think injera wet is what's usually common and used in our family.
And I'm going to close it out with our last question. What is your favorite thing about your family?
Okay, so for that, I think, you know, let me start with this. So when I was getting ready to get married, my siblings, you know, and, you know, my aunts and my uncles and all of them tell me, okay, you know, we're gonna get together and invite like 9 or 10 of your friends and come over. It's gonna be a little party. And I was like, okay, all right, cool. I'll call 9 or 8 of my friends. I'm like, yeah, so we'll get together, you know, to celebrate like a little pre-wedding. We're gonna celebrate together, man. It won't be quick to come through. You know, they got on there just jeans on or whatever. They're coming through, but they tell me, though, like, hey, make sure you get dressed real suit because we're gonna have cameras. We're gonna take pictures. You know, just to make sure you and, you know, your wife. We're back there, just make sure you got dressed up. And then they open the door and it's like 200-something people. I mean, it's a pre-wedding party. So anyways, it's a huge party, a lot of people there, cameras. So I think everyone just sacrificed to move into one area in the Washington, D.C., Maryland area to be near each other so we can be, you know, bonded as a family. We support one another, like that pre-wedding party I just told you about. Any event, any sicknesses, deaths, illnesses, you know, like, you don't have to really worry. It's like a big church family, you know, like, so, you know, we still have like our churches and, you know, and our families, you know, extended families, but like our tight knit Gilauha family is also very close knit, and they're there when you need them. I think that's one thing I like about my family that's very favorite to my heart.
All right, that is all. Thank you for taking the time to sit down and share about the family with me.
Oh, you're welcome. I learned a lot myself. Thanks.